lack of exercise, stress, and
Hello and welcome to a special report. We are in season 2, it's episode 6, and I'm very excited about this episode. Get an opportunity to have a conversation with someone I believe is truly indeed special. And all of the research that I've done, because you know me, I like to go in and dig. Everything that I found out, there's a common thread there, and perhaps by the end of the conversation, you too will discover what that is. So I'll leave it to you, but I want to say hello to our guest. He's someone who has risen from, his boyhood days of trying to find himself. He did just that, and he found himself all the way on the world stage and imprinted his name right there, but decided he's returning home to make a contribution. He wants to be able to be part of that developmental path for his nation. I'm speaking of none other than Mr. Stephen Fevrier. He has been a Workers' Party candidate as the main opposition prepares for the pending general elections. Castries North, endorsed for Castries North. Thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation with me.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Fun. Castries North, and what area of Castries North are you specifically from?
Summersdale. Spent most of my time in Summersdale and in BZ.
Yeah, and your name is quite synonymous with what we would call church.
Yeah.
Faith.
Correct.
Everything good. You are the son of a pastor, Pastor Joseph Fevrier. That's correct. So tell us a bit about your family.
Thank you, Lissa, and good evening, viewers. As you said, I was brought up in an extremely Christian home. My father, Reverend Joseph Fevriere, was the Baptist pastor. He led the congregation at the First Baptist Church on Darling Road. My mother was a homemaker, but also in her own way a missionary. She studied religion at the seminary in Toronto, and decided to also return to St. Lucia, having completed her studies in theology and to serve. She too followed my father into the Baptist Church, and that's where the journey began. Of course, there were 3 of us, 3 children. My sister, Esther, who was the eldest, of course now deceased. My brother Timothy, a little older than me, 4 years to be exact. And there was the youngest one, the troublesome one, Stephen Fevrier, who you are having a conversation with this evening. So we had a very tightly knit family, which revolved around maybe 2 or 3 things. One would be the church, 2 would be family. We spend quite a bit of time with each other. And the 3rd would be community. And given the object and purpose of my parents' life and the commitment, we spend quite a bit of time in the community, not only in Castries North, to be fair, but as far south as Vieux-Fort, Micoud, Bexor. So we had a very good and, I would say, ordinary child upbringing. It was not about material things. It was about family. It was about giving back. It was about knowing your neighbor. So I must say, it was, looking back, it wasn't always fun when I was growing up, but it was a wonderful childhood, and one which I'm very proud of.
We'll get to discover why it wasn't always fun, but we have some photos. I want you to walk us down memory lane. I want to take that journey with you as we look at some of your wonderful childhood photos. Talk us through this.
So I think this would be circa 1980 or 81. I think I had just turned 4 years old. My wonderful mother in the background. I believe that's my neighbor Dion Lamontine standing next to me. And I think that maybe one of the scholars to the left. So this was at the ramp. That's long before the Royal St. Lucian was built. And we're having a bit of fun. I was about to cut my cake. And I quite like that shoot, actually. But it was quiet times, good times.
Yeah, you seem very happy there, very blissful, and just enjoying life.
Definitely, definitely.
Just enjoying life.
My mother and father did the very best they could to ensure that we had a normal and happy upbringing.
Yeah. And let's see what we have on the next slide. There you are. Ooh.
This is my sister, of course, Esther, to the right. Of course, me, I look like I growing a little bit of hair.
That's you. That's you there in the middle. Now it's completely gone. Full circle, you've come.
Indeed, indeed, Lissa. And my brother, attentively holding my hand, watchfully, ensuring that I don't cross the road. I think it would be.
It would seem that he took his role as big brother quite seriously.
He still does, unfortunately.
That's a good thing. That's a very good thing to have a big brother look over you and someone that you can turn to as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And let's see what's on the other side here. Oh.
Yes. I think
is that a frown on your face? The skull there.
I think I was trying to have a projected debonair, cool look.
Oh, that's what it is. That's what it is. Okay.
My brother, myself, I suspect that was a Sunday afternoon after church. On Darling Road somewhere, and of course we were dressed in our Sunday best, as it were.
Loving the bell bottoms. So that's good. And on the other side, beautiful family portrait there.
Beautiful. My father looking extremely proud, my sister towering over me, my brother a bit of a scowl on his face, and my delightful mom standing next to her husband proudly. And
there on the other end,
this is a nice one.
Yeah.
Of course, this is far beyond my recollection, but of course my mother holding me, cuddling me gently. My brother looking very precocious, interested.
And your dad always has it very a peaceful look on his face, very proud as well. Indeed. You could see that coming through the photo. That's a gleeful look.
Where did you get those photos? So this is my lovely cousin Lillian. She resides in the UK now, and it's me. I think I was maybe about 4 years old at the time. In our first home in Summersdale.
Yes, it looks like you were about to
I had a smile
get on up, and have some fun for the day. I'm picturing maybe a great Sunday afternoon, and wow, a picture that says a lifetime of memories, doesn't it?
1971, long time ago.
Yes.
My maternal grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and my paternal grandmother. I think that was in the gardens, and my father extremely proud, my mother quite happy.
Yes.
Just after they got married.
Yeah. Oh, now that's an interesting photo there. We have the former Prime Minister there now. This is Sir John Compton. I recognize Sir George Mallet, and the person in the middle there would be... I think
it's like Hollis Bristol, perhaps.
Okay, so interesting photo. Walk us through that one.
I'm not sure, but usually my father would receive different professions from time to time. Maybe this was a activity to commemorate Nurses Week, but from time to time we receive dignitaries, including the Prime Minister at the time, who would often make himself available to celebrate either achievements or special occasions. And on those occasions, my father would certainly make every effort to ensure that these special guests were well received and, treated with the necessary proper care and attention. And
so at that age, when you were there, perhaps in that pew, or were you standing somewhere in a corner looking on? Do you have any memories?
I was probably being very mischievous, perhaps outside running around somewhere.
But the impressions that having, such figures come to your home left a lasting impression for you?
But I think it also motivated my father's deep interest in politics. Of course, he never was overt in his political leanings, but I think he secretly harbored, if not secretly, certainly he did have a preference for one political party. Of course, that's the political party which I have now elected to stand with. And I think through his own interest in politics, his interest in the development of the country, of course, he was a shepherd on the spiritual side, but certainly he did have a very keen eye for the country and for the progress that the country should make. In fact, I think I've inherited that interest, as it were, in politics and the development of the country from him. Although his main focus and preoccupation would have been the things of God, but certainly the country's development, both in terms of infrastructure, but the development of individuals, persons, remain very close to his heart.
What I wanted you to walk us through as well, your life as a young boy. Before we leave, that's you there.
Indeed.
Yes.
This was me at the OECS mission in Geneva. I was, I believe, about to deliver a statement, going through my notes, and I was about to take the floor in, I believe, a negotiating session. It could have been around COVID because, of course, we were definitely meeting virtually. So these are good memories as ambassador, and it was a proud moment for me. Yes, this is another interesting one. This is the former Prime Minister, leader of the opposition, Alan Chasney, flanked by the then head of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, Kitui. And to his right would be, of course, Dr. Didicus Jules, the head of the OECS, and, of course, yours truly to the far left.
And lots of work you've done so much on the global stage, and this final one here would be? That
is the head of the CTBTO in Vienna, former head. He went on subsequently to be Prime Minister of Burkina Faso, good friend of mine, and of course I had the honor and privilege of being received by him at his office in Vienna. I think that may have been around 2019, if my memory stands correctly.
Yeah, have you told him about your decision to enter the political fray? Are you following his footsteps?
I haven't. I haven't quite been in touch in the last year, but certainly will. I'm sure he'll find out.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably has a word or two of advice to give to you. But looking at those photos there, and what a journey it would seem that you've had from your days growing up in Summers Day all the way to the world stage, and we want to be able to track that in conversation. I think some people look upon your family as being very interesting, just for the fact that you that Christian household. For you, what was it like? Did you find yourself having to always be, as we would say, children must be on the P's and Q's and be very well behaved? Did you feel that you had that pressure to always hold up to some ideal because your father was such a well-known pastor?
I think there are two elements to this. The first one would be, I think my parents did not put undue pressure on us, and I'm very thankful, particularly for my mother and father, who allowed us to be children, allowed us to find ourselves, as it were. But of course, I believe people who went to our church, their kids, I think, had the belief that we were, a little better, more mannered, perhaps more disciplined, and the expectations were higher. So I think the higher expectations were really external. But my mother always protected us. She ensured that we were able to find ourselves, grow in a way where we would be allowed to make mistakes, allowed to find ourselves in the world that we existed. So my mom and father did not put any additional pressure on us to live up to an expectation for our personal conduct. We were normal kids.
You spoke about your sister Esther now having passed. What was that period like for you, having to have lost someone so close, and she was indeed young, having passed at the time? And how do you think your family was able to weather that tragedy?
It's a good question. I think it was tragic not only because she died and we miss her dearly, but I think she died at a point where she had found herself. I think her journey through adolescence may not have been the easiest, but when she got into her 30s and she was finding herself, indeed she had found herself and her purpose, she had a chronic illness which required some treatment, and the treatment that she received resulted in a pulmonary embolism which claimed her life. But I'm satisfied that before she died, in the months and perhaps years leading up to her final moments, she had found herself and she was content and she was happy. So that's the bittersweet part of it. We've lost her, but I'm happy that before she passed, she was able to find a sense of peace, a sense of comfort. She had found herself.
And did you thought the family got closer as a result of her passing?
I think it was one of those moments where you can't question the decision of God. You can't question the reasons behind her leaving us. We cherished her memory. But of course, for me, it was one of the first instances where you had to really divorce yourself from any agency, accepting what has taken place, cherishing the memory, learning from it, and ensuring that we stayed close with each other, loved each other. And I do think that we grew a lot closer as a consequence.
Yeah, and as you continued on your own journey, did you now get a sense of how did that impact you? I want to ask how it impacted you on how you saw yourself, the goals that you had set for yourself. Did it at all give you more of a fire in the belly, if you will, to try to pursue your dreams?
I think it caused me to reflect not only on the future but on the past. There's always sibling rivalry, and at that moment I wondered, maybe I could have been kinder, maybe I could have been more patient, maybe I could have been more tolerant, maybe I could have been more accepting. And that is something which, of course, definitely shaped my future conduct towards my brother, towards my mom, towards my dad. That when somebody leaves you, there's no more opportunity to say, I'm sorry. There's no more opportunity to say, I love you. There's no more opportunity to say, you know what, I was being a brat. I didn't mean it. You're my sister and I love you. So, it really did shape my desire to ensure that the people who are closest to me, those who entrust me with their love, care, and attention, that I do take due care with them. And of course, I'm imperfect. And sometimes I say a word or two which may not be kind. But I'm quick to call and say, you know what, it was my bad. I'm sorry. Let's move on. So I think, that has been a bit of a catalyst for me being a little more retrospective, reflective, as it were, and ensure that those who entrust me with their love, care, and attention, that I do that justice.
So when you talk about that love, care, and attention, and I'm wondering about, the family dynamics and between the parents, one would often get the impression that your dad would, probably be the one to be the disciplinarian in the home, by virtue of the fact that, he's a man of God and he has, that strict way of getting things done. And what was it like at home? Give us a little insight.
No, completely wrong.
Oh.
My dad was quite mild-mannered. He would speak very slowly, very calmly, very reflectively. My mother would find the strap. She would find the broom. She would find the shoe.
Sounds like my mother.
And she was a little more quick to anger, at least to ensure that we stayed on the right path. But it was all good. She cared for us, and she was able to balance being that disciplinarian with love, with compassion, with tenderness. So we were made to account. We were held to a standard that she set, not a higher standard, but a standard that she set. But certainly it was done in a way which was nurturing, where we learned the lessons that she wanted to teach us. So it wasn't gratuitous punishment, but it was done in a nurturing and loving way.
Yeah. And the sort of influence she had on you, how would you categorize that? How would you qualify it?
She was a strong lady. She was an extremely strong lady. She would make things happen. She didn't accept no on matters which were important to her. She believed in her children. She was very protective of us. And even as a homemaker, as a housewife, as a mother, she was extremely influential in my own professional development and my development as a person. So even until recent times, I would call her, maybe until last month, and say to her, this is what's happening in my life. These are the issues which I'm confronting, and how should I deal with it? Sometimes she would say to me, Ishmael, take your time, perhaps not giving me specific advice, but would be very encouraging for me to reflect on those matters which I confront or I'm confronting, and be patient and take decisions carefully, not be impulsive, not be impetuous, but reflect and make sound decisions. So she was quite a very calming person, someone who helped me sort through complex decision making at times with a very peaceful, even-tempered disposition.
You will miss that. I can sense it from you that you,
absolutely,
because she has passed.
Absolutely, absolutely. On the day she passed last Monday, I got a call from a friend of mine, and he said to me words which I'm finding to be increasingly true. He said, she's no longer there to take your call, but you can call on her in moments of need, in moments of discomfort, in moments of questioning, and ask for her advice. And interestingly, that has proven to be very true. I think this week, which has been a very interesting one for me, bittersweet, that I have made the plunge into the political arena. She's not here with me, but I have been asking her questions, and she has been answering me. So I will miss the conversations, but she is holding my hand even whilst I sit next to you.
And I'm just wondering, because everyone that I've spoken to said, Stephen, he's such a smart guy. He's such a smart guy. Did you always know that you were a smart guy?
Absolutely not. Absolutely, completely not. I think there are two parts to this. My performance academically was quite poor, to say the least. Anglican infant school, I was not an example in terms of my academic performance, let's just say. Primary school, my performance was far below the expectations of my parents. Common entrance, my brother went into college, St. Mary's College, flying colors. A few years later, of course, I went to Entripo, which was a really good experience, I must admit. But of course, my parents had expectations which I didn't meet. Bit of a story about getting into Entripo. My father said to me, okay, now you're here, we will make the best of the time here, and you will commit yourself to your studies. So I really want to see what you will do in your first term. So of course, after the first term, I presented my report to my father, and he looked at the column, placement in class. He went across and was dead last. So I think but at that time, I think he had some reservations of whether I would be able to make it. But it was tough. I tried. My mother got every single tutor available for me. But of course, it didn't reflect itself in improved performance.
Why do you think it was so tough for you now that you've, you know, the hindsight?
I think kids develop at different stages, you know. I think the expectation that at 11 years a child is meant to take an examination, a standardized test that would be determinative of that child's future, I think is a bit much. And what I've found is that those people who performed at the extremely high level in that early phase of life, performance sometimes atrophies, it sometimes plateaus, sometimes is maintained. But I think those standardized tests, which were very important, the future of children, I think it put undue pressure on children. So it's one of I'm not a big fan of standardized tests, and I don't think that at that age, tests should necessarily be determinative of the path of a child's life for the next 5 years. But I did, whilst my performance didn't reflect that potential, and I hadn't been able to unlock my academic potential, I did believe in myself. I did have this light which burnt quite brightly within me, where I did know that I would, notwithstanding my poor performance, I would find myself in a position where I could make my parents proud. And not only making my parents proud, that I could satisfy my own God-given talents.
But how did you turn it around?
Well, it wasn't always very easy. I must confess, after really good, I think it was 3 years in Entrepot, made lots of friends, wonderful teachers, great experience. My parents recognized that my performance had not improved. And my aunt, Lillian Emmanuel, who lived in Canada, she invited me to be with her. So, of course, I packed my bags, moved to Toronto. And I remember that summer doing a standardized test, or a test which would have allowed it wasn't a test, it was an assessment to see what grade I should be placed in. Having done that test, I was placed in a grade which was 2 classes below where I should have been based on my age. So, of course, there were some challenges, fundamental challenges in what I had been previously exposed to. But I'm not sure what happened, but there was a desire on my part to really deliver on that potential which I knew I had. But also, unequally, I think the approach to pedagogy, at least in that school, allowed me to unlock that talent. It was not always about the final answer to the question. It was about the logical process employed to get there. And with that, I got many final answers incorrectly. But of course, there was a logical sequence, a logical process, which informed that decision. And I think once I started to do better at school, and you know, there's a saying that once you learn how to win, it's easy. For sure, it wasn't easy, but certainly once I got the rhythm going and I started to work harder, I started gaining more confidence. Then a few years later, I was able to apply for university, and I got into my university of choice, which was the University of Western Ontario. And yeah, I think the journey went forward from there. First 2 years of Western were pretty much of a disaster, but we won't speak about that. But I did end with a B+ average with honors. And again, I remember my day of graduation being with my mom, my aunt, and my brother, and this enormous beaming smile that my mother exuded. Thinking back to those days where she had to send me for evaluations to see whether or not I had any cognitive challenges to graduating in a pretty handy way from a good institution. She was proud.
Did you ever feel less than? Because, you know, if you're in a school, at secondary school, and all of your classmates are getting A's and you come in last, did you ever feel that maybe there was something wrong with you? How did you survive that?
I don't know if it is something which is innate, whether I was willfully blind to my circumstance, but I didn't accept that my grades reflected my potential.
Okay. So you just had it in you.
I believe that would happen. I believe that would happen. And I continue, but of course there's something which I also believe in. Faith is important, and faith is critical in any endeavor, whether in the physical or spiritual realm. But there are three parts for me to faith, which is patience, because it's not going to happen overnight. Trusting in the outcome, and finally work. Unless you could have all the faith in the world, if you don't work for what is important to you, you will never manifest your conviction. So the Bible does say that faith without works is dead. And yes, faith for me was and is patience. It won't happen tomorrow. Trust, believing in the outcome, and work your butt off to realize your goals.
And it was in that you did indeed work it off, because now you're at what one consider very, very top as the advisor to the Director General of the World Trade Organization. It could not have been easy getting there. So this career path, how did you choose this career path? You chose it, it chose you. How did you start on that journey into international trade?
So I think it started somewhere around the year 2000. After I finished my first degree, I was looking for a job, saw something about trade policy project in St. Lucia, funded by the Canadian government, the Canadian International Development Agency, CIDA. And it was at the OECS. So I applied, I was successful. And I worked for this very interesting St. Lucian, someone who was of immense intellectual talent, but also a cultural icon, a writer, an artist, Honorable Charles Cadet. And that was quite an interesting experience. He was very, very diligent, very rigorous, very thorough, very demanding of himself and those who worked with him. And this other lady who has become a very dear friend of mine, Maura Felix Richardson, who with him ran the trade policy project. So, of course, I had completed a degree in political science, focused on international relations. And I started understanding the importance of international trade. The trade policy project was a capacity building intervention funded by the Canadian government to provide the OECS with the capacity to engage in negotiations. And there were a number of multilateral and plurilateral negotiations which St. Lucia and the OECS had been engaged in. There was the WTO, Doha round, there was the FTA negotiations, which of course stillborn but were engaged at the time. There was the EPA negotiations, and of course there were negotiations within the context of the CSME. So yes, that was a pretty heady time for international trade, and I was really at the cold face of those discussions, very junior, but I was quite exposed at the time, and I worked with two very, let's say, mentors who guided me. After my, of course, subsequent to that, I pursued a master's in international commercial law, and then I returned to the OECS and worked again with Charles Cadet before I found an opportunity at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs International Trade, specifically the Trade and Legal Department. Of course, we continued, my files were again trade, and continued to follow WTO. I followed, I believe it was EPA as well, negotiations. And that took me to Antigua one fateful day in 2005. And during those discussions, I believe it was on services, trade, and the services market, I met some of the most illustrious, talented intellects from our region in the field of international trade policy. It was Richard Bernal, who was the then Director General of the CRNM, Henry Gill, Junior Lodge, really towering intellectuals. And I had occasion to spend some time with them, and for some reason or another, they took a liking to me. Not sure what I said or what I did, but certainly they thought I had the talent and the intellect and the drive to contribute to the EPA negotiations. Not in a meaningful way, but I did play a support role. And I was given the opportunity to be in Brussels, interfacing with the European Commission, interfacing with ACP ambassadors. And that was the beginning of my journey into this really important, but not always well understood area of international trade policy.
And now you're all the way to the very top of the World Trade Organization.
Yes, well, it didn't happen from that internship. Afterwards, I returned to St. Lucia, and I continued my work until I received a call from one ambassador who I had met in Brussels, Ambassador George Bullen. And he visited St. Lucia, and he said to me, Mr. Fevrier, you did very good work in Geneva, in Brussels. Would you like to continue? We have an offer to go to Geneva. Of course, I pondered, not for very long, and we went through the process. It was a competitive process, and I was able to be successful. And I went off to Geneva for an initial period of 6 months. And the interesting thing about that decision to leave is I had the option. I went to the permanent secretary and I said to him, I got this opportunity to go to Geneva. And he said, well, you were in Brussels last year, you were in China for a few months, now you want to go where? To Geneva? He said, you are welcome to go, but you're going to have to resign. And of course, everyone said to me, you have a good job, you're a diplomat or you're a foreign service officer, it's a coveted position, don't resign for 6 months assignment. Of course, I did. What I did was contrary to what everyone else I said. I resigned and I took on the opportunity, and you're talking to someone 20 years later who's had a pretty fulfilling career. First at the mission, then as I ran the trade policy practice for the Commonwealth Secretariat in Geneva, then spent 3 years in the South Pacific. I covered Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, based in Suva, Fiji, which was a quite interesting experience. So I've had the multilateral experience. I provided advisory support in Geneva, advisory support in the South Pacific. Went back to Geneva in 2018 to be head of mission. 2020 became ambassador. 2021 I was called by someone I have immense respect for, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, and she invited me to join her top team. And I've served in her cabinet for the last 4 years. It's one of the most interesting, compelling, challenging experiences of my life. And I was proud to, in that moment, in all those moments, fly the St. Lucia flag as high as I could.
And then the question that everyone wants answered. You are at the top of the career that you were working so hard for. And you leave it to come home. That's great. You're coming home. We like that. But to enter politics. Why?
Well, I must say to you, when I made a decision, many people have since then told me that I was a bit mad to do so. But I think I've had this longing to return, and maybe my frame of reference is different. Maybe my ambitions for the country are too high. But over the last, I would certainly say over the last 10 years, but for sure in the last 5 years, I've seen an acceleration of decline in this country. I've seen social and physical decay. I've seen urban decay. I'm seeing more people telling me about their own concerns with their own physical security. I'm reading horror stories about the provision of healthcare or what passes for healthcare. I'm seeing the physical infrastructure crumbling. I'm seeing of any cohesive or coherent plan for the future of this country. I'm seeing young people increasingly hopeless about their futures. I'm seeing government ministers unaccountable for the wealth that they have generated in office. I'm seeing institutions which should be safeguarding the interests of you, me, and the viewing public being systematically dismantled and politicized. So I had an option. I could remain in Geneva. I could continue along the path which was comfortable, difficult, but comfortable. Or I could return, join a team of men and women who believed in a better future for this country, who believe that we can become the best, who believe in the ambitions of Sir John, who believe that we should be doing better for ourselves and holding ourselves to account. Or I could remain where I was, and I chose to do the thing which I thought was the easier option, which is to return, because I would not have been comfortable remaining overseas, pursuing my own career, helping other countries, supporting multilateral issues, whilst my own country nears and sinks closer and closer into the abyss.
What was that conversation like with your family, your dad included?
Well, in October, I'll take a step back. I made a decision on the 8th of October. I was in a West African country, and we landed, and I mean, of course, you get these briefs prepared for you, and I'm looking at the data, and I'm looking at the profile of the country and the development of the country year over year. I mean, that country had a very low human development index. In the level of poverty was quite high, and in 10 years the government had been able to turn around the economy. Infrastructure was amazing, the airport was amazing, the facilities, the ambition. You could land, and within the first day or two you could see the ambition that government had for its people. It wasn't about the buildings, it wasn't about the infrastructure per se. It was about the young ladies who were working, the young men who found jobs, the services which were being provided. The country was moving, and that was also replicated in other countries that I had been to, where you see these countries which 15 years ago people would have scoffed and said, oh, that country is a backwater, and they've moved. And relative to us, I think we have a lot to account for ourselves. So, of course, I saw the development plan. I saw what was being done in terms of the provision of jobs, sustainable employment for young people. Looked at the strategic view that the government had, which was promoted and embraced cross sectors. And I wondered what was happening with my own country, because I can't tell you what our vision is for the next 10 years. In fact, I can't even tell you what our vision is for the next 5. And if a country and a people don't have a vision for themselves, they go nowhere. And to compound that, we have a situation where institutions are being dismantled, the lack of accountability by public officers, and young people in particular are wondering, what is in it for me? Why should I do the right things? Why should I conduct myself in the right way when those people who should have moral authority, those people with legitimacy, are not failing to account for themselves? So it was, for me, a not so difficult decision. For my family, of course, it has been. It comes with enormous, I won't say sacrifice, because everyone is making a sacrifice. But the biggest sacrifice would for me to remain where I was, and for my country, the country which I love, the country which I believe in, the people that I believe in, the people that I know can do better, are not given the opportunities that could allow them to fully live out their own talents and dreams.
You believe you're ready for the rough and tumble of the political arena?
You never know if you are ready until you get into the arena. But I will fight. I will fight every day. I will work as hard as I can. You know, I got up early. I'm a hard worker. I've been up early every morning. I go to bed late every night. I'm knocking on doors. I'm meeting people. I'm stopping buses. Anybody who wants to talk to me, I'm available. And as I said, you know, if I have to knock on every door in Castries North, I will. Because what is at stake in this country at this moment is far important for me to not give the best of myself. And I will be doing so.
Now, over the last few months, you've been on the ground, and I don't know how you've been able to straddle, you know, doing your work duties. Not that you've officially resigned, but back, you know, then over the months that you've been coming home and doing some of the groundwork. Walking through the constituency, because you know the constituency is more than just your neighborhood, your childhood neighborhood. What were your impressions as you traveled and as you continue to travel across Castries North?
It was a mix of sadness and regret. You know, when I look at where, for example, the VBCC club is today, and I look at its condition, I wonder what happened. 30 years ago, it was more vibrant. I look at the playing field, for example, Leclerc, and I'm wondering what happened. You know, there was public housing, which was knocked down a few years ago. What happened there? People have been displaced, no new opportunities, no new homes for them. I see people living in conditions in 2025, which I am frankly appalled at. Where is the plan for housing? Where's the plan for young people, those young people looking at the show right now who want a place that they could be proud of? Where is the plan for these people? Where is the plan for the teachers, the nurses, the doctors? Where are they going to live? There's no affordable housing. There's poor service delivery. And I went to the health center, which is a place that I frequented when I was a baby, and it is more or less the same. I mean, is that acceptable? Is this what passes for governance? Is this what our resources are being used for? But of course, we could find the resources for festivals, could find the resources for other things which are very important. But to ensure that the medical care of our citizens, the older people in Castries North, is not being adequately addressed.
But you know, one thing that any sitting government will tell you is that the resources, limited resources in this country, and the government has to be all to all. So how does the government now balance having to do the festivals, because they do serve a necessary purpose, for the tourism, you know, creating a buzz. People do need an outlet for them to be able to enjoy themselves, release the pressure, if you will. So what would your thinking be about being able to meet all of those demands?
Look, I'm not suggesting in any way that, of course, these things play a very important role in bringing in foreign direct investment, bringing in foreign exchange, bringing in tourists. All of these things are very noble and important for the future prospects of this country. So I will not gainsay those initiatives. Some of them I support. However, there must be priority given to the health and well-being of people. It must be. And the extent to which I see focus being given at the community level, because I'm not speaking about what's taking place at St. Jude's. That's a whole different story, which we'll get into later. But I met person after person, some with COPD, some with who need dialysis, some who have pains and there's no effective means of there's no diagnostic facilities or enough diagnostic facilities which will allow these people to know exactly what the problem is. The cost of medication, Some people have told me that they've been waiting for the responsible authorities to respond to their needs and demands in terms of, these are shut-in people and still waiting. Now, I will not blame the nurses and doctors and the medical professionals who are doing an outstanding job in very trying and difficult circumstances. But the provision of healthcare, for example, can't be jabbersack. There must be a cohesive, comprehensive plan for me at the community level and at the national level. Now, I would have to say I'm not a medical professional and medical expert, but these are the things that I'm hearing from my constituents day after day after day. And it's something which I think is unacceptable in this 2025, where people do not feel that they have access to the service which is important to them.
The government speaks about having universal healthcare, that universal healthcare plan. Have you had a chance to do some form of an analysis, look at it, size it up a bit? What do you think about that, and compared to what the United Workers' Party, because the UWP does have a proposed healthcare plan?
Well, look, I'm not sure. I have no idea what they mean by universal healthcare, whether it's for over 80-year-old people. I'm not sure if it's for people who are, let's say, without jobs. I'm not sure what it means. It seems to be a moving target. But what I do know is those countries which have universal healthcare programs, they are implemented differently. Of course, if you look at the NHS in the UK, look at the system in Canada, these are single-payer systems where the government writes a check for these services. And these are countries which have the economic means to defray those costs. These countries have huge balance sheets. In small countries like ours, it would be an extremely difficult proposition for the government to write the check for the provision of health care without having a means of facilitating payment, whether it be through insurance. So I'm very much attracted to the approach being proposed by the UWP, which is government takes care of infrastructure, pays the salary of nurses, and of course insurance would cover what is done, those interventions at the point of service delivery. I think that's fair. That is good in terms of burden sharing, and through that, there is the incentive of cost containment. You have in public systems what is referred to as the tragedy of the commons. If everything is public, then there's no ability to contain costs. But if there is a private, commercial, let's say, costing, then you understand what the cost of every intervention would be, and then you can make adequate provisions for it. So, I'm not sure what they mean by universal health care. I'll be interested in reading a little more about it. But I think the plan that the UWP has to have a system which is predicated on insurance and burden sharing is one which I am extremely attracted to.
Yeah. And so as you move around the constituency and you're meeting the residents, what are some of the things that are jumping out at you and you're perhaps a bit stunned by, some of the issues that they are confronted by?
Well, it's a lack of housing, that's for one. I think the young people in the constituency are not able to, they've told me at least, that notwithstanding some of the initiatives by the current administration, some of the ideas which they have for job creation, for small businesses, there is no means through which they can achieve progress. I was speaking to a lady yesterday in a hair salon, Faye, and she's speaking about the high cost of finance. I was speaking to another gentleman, Darrell Black, and he was telling me he wants to have a little business on VG Beach with beach chairs, but he doesn't know how to start. And getting financed through the government program, which I won't name, is very challenging. And so, look, I think we need to pay attention, particularly to young people. The young people are quite innovative. They don't want to work for people. They want to, create their own businesses. And we need to hold their hands. We need to do the best we can to ensure that they could materialize those dreams. So, apart from healthcare, I see ensuring that there is support, wraparound support for business development, particularly for young people. Housing. There's a perennial shortage of housing. Even
but have you thought about how you winning, if you were to win, these are the problems that you would have to come in and fix? Have you thought about how you would be tackling those issues?
I am really on the housing side attracted to the PPP proposition. I do think that the government can work on the infrastructure bit, the subterranean cables, the infrastructure, and the private partners could do the actual physical construction of those homes. I think that both single family and multifamily residents would be important. I think there's quite a bit of land in Union. There are a few places in the constituency which would be well suited for that. So I think housing would be a high priority. Young people don't want to be living at their parents' home, but of course you could get a loan for a car, but getting access to finance for property is quite challenging. How do we address those issues? So I think the dream that parents had of owning their own homes, I think less and less and less people can do so. Teachers, they work hard. Police officers, hardworking people. Doctors, young doctors, school teachers, people who work hard every day in this country, they're giving the best of themselves. There's no line of sight to them owning their own homes now.
I know the government recently announced that for the very group of St. Lucians that you spoke of, their group of professionals, that there is a stamp, the stamp duty that will be waived, and I believe the value of the home should be not exceeding, I believe, $400,000, if I'm not mistaken. So that sort of approach, it would seem that the government has given some thought to the housing crisis or shortage that we're experiencing, and in a bit to help and incentivize.
I like policy, but I want to see policies materialize into reality. I hear these things, but of course, when I speak to my constituency, I am not seeing, and they are not seeing, any manifestation of those ideas. If this will help, great. But I think we have to work doubly hard to ensure that these people who are so deserving of support in owning a roof over their heads, that we can make it a reality for them. So yes, home ownership is quite important. Look, not everybody will own a home, but having conditions which you could be happy with, you could be proud of, is something which I believe. And even those who are not for new homes, but people who want to refurbish, fix their existing residences, their existing places of living, I think that is something that we have to look at. So housing is important, healthcare is important, support for the young people, getting young people both in terms of the economic opportunities to fulfill their talents, as well as through sports and other extracurricular activities are things which we need to desperately focus on and pay attention to.
Earlier on, you said that you're ready to fight, willing to fight. You have the fight in you, and some will say, well, it's going to be a fight because your opponent, the senior minister Stephenson King, quite formidable. Many believe, he's been in the political game for quite some time, and they've even coined the phrase, he's known as the heavy roller. So when you size up your opponent, what comes to your mind? What are your perceptions of Senior Minister Stephenson King?
Frankly, I don't really pay too much attention to other people. I have a responsibility. I want to approach the people of Castries North and ask them to entrust me with their vote. I know what my record is. I know what my intentions are. I can't speak for Mr. King. He has been around for somewhat close to 30 years. I looked through the constituency, and frankly, I'm very surprised at some of the gaps that I see. I'm very surprised at some of the needs which are evident, which would be, clear even to a blind person. So I'm a bit surprised, but I'm not going to make a judgment on his tenure. That's for the people of Castries North to decide. What it is for me to do now is to present to them what my plans and priorities are and to earn their trust. I don't expect the people of Castries North to say, this is Stephen, he came from a big job, I'm going to vote. I want to earn their trust. I want them to feel me, to speak to me, to get to know who I am. And I'm confident if they do so, they will know that their best interest is in supporting United Workers' Party and the candidate, Stephen Fevrier. So that's my view of the incumbent. What I find very surprising, Lissa, extremely surprising, is the number of Labour Party supporters, including people in the hierarchy of the party, who have been encouraging me in this battle, encouraging me to continue. It seems that he is not as liked as he would want to be with the party that he has sided with.
And so have you sought to find out more about what would, be fueling this perceived, I don't want to use the word dislike, but perhaps he doesn't wield enough favor within the St. Lucia Labour Party. He's not a member of the party, but he's a member of the Labour Party government. I
would reserve comment on that. All I could say is people's character is manifested through their actions, and I think people's actions speak loudly.
And when you talk about those actions, and you said you'd reserve judgment, but an action that many, whether you are Flobo, you are Labour, whether you are in St. Lucia and you're indifferent, or you St. Lucia and you're in the diaspora, or you're not St. Lucian at all, no one can forget the move by Stephen King at the last general elections when he sort of defected from the United Workers' Party. You have some thoughts on that?
I have no specific thoughts on that. That's a matter between him and his conscience. What I can tell the people of Castries North is I am there for you, not for myself. I will never betray you. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to do what is required for me to uplift your life, and I'm going to commit myself to that cause. What his intentions are, what he did before, that is with him and his conscience. My focus is on the people of Castries North and delivering for them.
You earlier on, and I'm get that sort of flashback, the photos that we saw earlier on, and Sir John Compton and Sir George Mallet, featuring prominently in those photos. And Stephen King has said that the flubble that Sir John Compton built, this is no more. That what exists now, it's powerful. So you seem to have been very akin to Sir John. You had a liking for him. You understood. You were somewhat, I get the sense that you were in awe of how he handled St. Lucia, managed his development. So why the UWP? Do you see that the UWP, is it different to what obtained under Sir John? Do you share that opinion that it's preferable?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think it's fair to say that the UWP built this country. If you look at Rodney Bay, it was an initiative led by Sir John. The redevelopment of Castries, Sir John. Point Seraphine, Sir John. Prince Albert Basin, Sir John. Urinora Airport, the East Coast Road, the Millennium Highway, the John Compton Dam, all of these things were UWP. I struggle to see what significant economic infrastructure has been laid down by the current government.
But I get the sense that what is being hinted at is that the principles, the values of the United Workers' Party that has changed compared to what Sir John had infused in his time?
I think the principle and values of the party remain intact. I think we have a visionary leader who believes that the country who has a pro-growth policy, who believes that through growth and expanding the economic potential, then you can, of course, then provide all of the benefits and services and the jobs required for people. So there's no conflict between infrastructural development and provision of good, high-paying jobs for people. In fact, they are aligned. And the policies of Sir John Compton, and of course you would predates my time, but certainly you would have heard that when they were dredging the swamp in Rodney Bay to create the marina and to create the causeway, the party which is now in power said it was a white elephant. I mean, most of our foreign exchange earnings come from that area. The marina is a hub of activity. Rodney Bay is a central point and a, let's say, a vector for investment. Again, it was scoffed at. It was big infrastructure. It was about, this was not a priority. But look, infrastructural development is also extremely important in expanding economic opportunities, and this is what the UWP has been known for. And the economic progress that we have made in this country, in large measure, is a result of those developments. Now, let me be very clear with you, Lissa. There are needs which have to be met now. And looking forward and having a big picture, having a big vision, and having ambition for your country should be the hallmark of any good government. But we need to also be careful to take care of the people in their circumstance, in the moment and now. So the vision which I am putting forward for you, having a big plan for the country, believing in an ambitious future for this country, does not mean that the little person or the big person or the person who is struggling or the person who needs support they should indeed be given. And the two should go hand in hand. But the philosophy of the UWP has been to ensure that the economy is strong enough, robust enough to support the creation of jobs, business growth, business development, and allowing people to take care of themselves. I just want to make one more point. Today I was speaking to a young lady on a bus, and she said to me that she is inclined to support me, but she's not sure. And
you rode the bus?
I was outside. I would have gone on the bus, but I was outside of the bus. And she said to me, she's inclined to support me, but she's not sure. So I said to her, explain to me what her thinking is. She said she got a contract. And I said, is that your value? You get a contract once every 5 years? For me, I want every young person looking at this show, whether you have a child or it's only you, that in 5 to 10 years, and before certainly, that people are economically independent. If you need to go for a CAT scan or you want to go for an MRI, you need medication, you don't need to go to a politician. If you don't need to go to a politician to pay your light bill. You don't need to go to a politician to get school books for your children. You don't need to go to a politician to fix. Society where we're cultivating, again, let me be very clear. Those needs exist and we need to fulfill those needs now. But we need to grow the economy in a way that becomes something which is no longer prevalent or normal. We need to create economic opportunities to create economic independence for people. No one wants to do that. No one wants to go to a politician to pay their light bill. No one wants to do that. And I am convinced that if we do what is right, again, I'm going to be very careful that we need to continue to support where those needs exist, but we have to grow the economy in a way that makes those realities, those difficult realities, something which is no longer as prevalent as they are today.
Your political leader, Alan Chastney, he draws a lot of criticism because, I'm hearing you speaking about, ambition within the government, a big vision. But Alan Chastney, he speaks on those terms, wanting bigger things for St. Lucia. And we've had this infamous phrase going around now because he was on a program and someone called in and said that Alan Chastney, after he laid out his vision, his plan, development plan, some caller said he wants to turn St. Lucia into a little Miami. So is it do we run the risk, or as individuals who are perhaps forward thinking and wanting more for our country, do we run that risk of perhaps thinking too big for St. Lucia? Does St. Lucia have it in it to be like a little Miami? Is that even possible?
But who are we, Lissa? The St. Lucia I know and the people I know in 1979 won the Nobel Prize for Economics. The St. Lucia I know and believe in won a Nobel Prize for Literature. The St. Lucia I know and believe in, we just beat the world at the Olympics. The St. Lucia I know and believe in, we produce some outstanding citizens. And the St. Lucia I know and believe in can do great things. But we need a government to empower us to achieve these results. But also we need a government with a vision. Now, I'm not sure about this Miami comparison, but St. Lucia needs to be the best at who and what it is. St. Lucia has to be proud of its natural endowments, what it is. St. Lucia is a beautiful country, in my estimation, the most beautiful country on the planet.
And you've been to many countries.
I've been to a few. and I believe that we could do better. And I believe we have to be more ambitious, not for ourselves, but for the young people, for the children. We have to, our inheritance to them must be a better society, must be a functioning society, better health care. They must be able to get the education that they need and deserve. The business people, young people, must have the economic opportunities that they want. I think we have to dream a little bigger. We need to be a little more, convinced that we can. But of course, we need government and policy to support that vision, government and policies to support that potential. And that is why I'm with the UWP. That is why I support the vision of the UWP. And I believe that the team of men and women who have been assembled under the leadership of Alan Chastney will deliver on that promise.
You certainly talk a very good game. I still want to be able to ask you, in terms of that development plan, what is that first step for St. Lucia? Just your own thoughts, because you are working, as you say, with a team. But what are the first steps you believe that we need to take for that national development to have that offshoot?
Well, I think in the period between 2016 and 2021, there were quite a number of ideas which were floated. I do think, again, we could walk through and discuss and reflect on what is the best approach. But I think there is huge potential in the south of the country which needs to be unlocked. I think that we have to be very deliberative in terms of expanding the infrastructure to open new corridors, particularly on the East Coast, for development. There is quite a bit of latent potential in the economy. And the other things which I believe could be more near term. So one of the fastest growing areas in the economy is services, and that's globally. Digitally delivered services is one of those areas. Last year grew at 9%. That is the provision of, so someone in Castries North could be on their computer developing content which could be sold anywhere in the world, 7 billion person market, through digital transmissions. What are we doing in that sector? How are we empowering young people to access those economic opportunities through the internet? So there are things which are more big picture visionary, like the examples I gave, but there are things which are available to us now, to the young people in particular, which could let them exploit their God-given potential and access new markets. So I think there's quite a bit. I don't want to go into specifics, but these are just 2 examples that I think would be very important to start unlocking the potential of this country.
Well, there'll be lots of time for us to be able to get into specifics. I do hope that you will come back on the forums when, the campaign trail is going to heat up. And I'm looking forward to getting some more clear and precise answers from you on some of those issues. But you're talking, and I'm thinking that while the infrastructure and the development plan, all of these things are great, but if we do not have the mindset as a people, I don't think much can come of a development plan, whatever strategies that may be. The people themselves need to be ready. They need to, they need to be able to. You have to take them along with you, don't you think? It's much like, as a young boy when you just did not get it, and then you had that unlocking moment. Something happened and your potential is completely unlocked. So what do you think about the mindset of our people? Is that something that factors in the way that you see it?
Well, I think I would have to disagree. I think our people want to achieve more. I think our people want more security. They want better conditions. They want to be able to go to the grocery store and get the foods which they would like to feed themselves and their children. And I think our people are industrious and hardworking people. So I think they're doing their part. I think it's for government to ensure that the facility and the infrastructure, both policy and otherwise, is in place to allow for that potential to be realized. But St. Lucians are hardworking. I mean, they are very capable. The organization I work with, there were 2 St. Lucians in very, very good jobs. You had Mr. Claude Chase and Jean-Yves Remy, 2 very, very accomplished lawyers working in the World Trade Organization, the appellate body. St. Lucians shine. They go to New York, they go to London, they shine, they do well. We're talented people. But we have had a successive failure in leadership. So why do we go overseas and perform admirably? Why do we go overseas and perform at a high level, at a level which is equal to and above others from countries with more resources? We have the potential, Lissa. We just need to be allowed the opportunity to do it.
And we can do this here,
absolutely,
right here, within our shores.
Absolutely.
You are a prime example of having to leave the shores. But now that you're back, I'm sure that you'll be taking some of what you've learned on the global stage and bringing it back home. Yes?
But that is certainly my intention. That is certainly my intention.
So then that brings me to ask you what I've also been hearing out, on the ground, that how much of a connection do you still have to Castries North? Having been gone for so long, the constituency has changed. The face of the constituency has changed. People have, moved on. They've passed away. You've had young people being residents who were born when you left, and new people moving into the neighborhood. So how much of a connection do you still have in Castries North?
Extremely strong. Notwithstanding the fact that I moved to pursue my education and pursue economic opportunities outside, every time I came to St. Lucia, I spent time in the constituency. The friends I had 30 years ago, I still have today. The people I was with today in BZ are people I've known for the last 35 years. The same guys that I swam on the beach behind Beachcomber with when I was 10 years old, when I married my parents' home to go on the beach and try to swim to Rat Island. These are the same guys I spent time with today and yesterday. These are my friends. I never lost touch with the constituency. The people who I know, the friendships I've built, they remain. So whilst I, of course, was not physically here and I had to leave these beautiful shores to pursue my education as well as to grow professionally, I never lost touch with my home, and Castries North is my home.
When you look at how your life has come sort of full circle, you ever get a moment, pinch yourself and say, how did I get here?
Well, yes and no. It didn't come easy. I never had a godfather who, I never took a magical carpet ride. It was a lot of grafting, late nights. I remember going to Geneva, I think it was 2005 or 6, and working from 8 in the morning until 11, 12 at night. I put in the hours. I knew coming back home on holidays, I would have my cap and I would my cap on my head and I would be in my shorts. I'm not sure people knew how hard I was working because, of course, I was on holiday. But I worked brutal hours, and I expended everything I had in so far as putting in the time, putting in the efforts, and doing honest, diligent work. And somehow I've been able to grow from that. I laid the foundation and built on those foundations. But what I want this story to illustrate to the young men, young girls out there is, whilst my beginning, I started struggling at Intripo, getting bad grades, not living up to my parents' expectations. If you work and you commit yourself to your belief, to your own talents, you can make something which is far greater than perhaps you believe in. So I believe that my story is one which is no different to any young person in Castries North that wants to achieve something. Their potential is there. Now, of course, I had an opportunity, and that helped me to propel me to where I am. And that is what I think government should be about. That is where government is important, to ensure that those people without the opportunity I had, that it could be provided. I am no different to those kids I went to school with, those kids who did far better than me. But again, the system didn't allow them to achieve their potential. So that's why I'm here. I believe that we can do better. I want the country to do better. And certainly I'll be working day and night to ensure that we can give people the opportunities that they need and they deserve.
Well, I thank you so much for sharing your story, your life story with us. I know I felt inspired by what you shared, because I didn't know that this gentleman who stood head and shoulder with the best of the world had a very rocky start at his home in Summersdale, but he has made it through. That perseverance and faith, you said, it's faith and patience. Is that correct?
Faith,
patience,
and for me, faith is patience, trust in the journey, and work.
I love that. I have to take that and put that up on my wall. I say, because every day can be challenging, and so you always want something to keep you inspired and to keep you moving. So I want to thank you very much, Stephen Fevrier, for sharing your story with us. I do hope that you've gotten to know the UWP Castries North candidate much better, and we are looking forward to having him back here. And as I said, as the campaign trail heats up, we'll be getting some more specific answers from him, and we do look forward to that. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be seeing you next time right here on the Special Report. I'm Lissa Joseph saying goodbye.